Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Digital Drop podcast. I'm Nejja Kenny, and today I'm joined by my colleague, Aaron Woods, a seasoned CIO with, I think it's coming up to about 25 years of professional experience, Aaron.
Unfortunately, yeah, 25 years or more.
Wow. And if I'm not mistaken, Aaron, most of that has been within the not-for-profit sector, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right. So let's see. I've worked mainly with charities and membership. I did a little bit. I did about a year at the time of the dot-com boom. So this would have been about year 2000. That was really Wild West and quite scary. So I skipped back in to charities after that.
Yeah. So, and would, if you just wouldn't mind, for the sake of our listeners that don't know who you are, just giving us a little bit of a walk through your career, because I know that you're the Royal College of Anaesthetists at the moment. You've been
Yeah.
there before. Tell us just a little bit about not just what you do, but why you do it as well. Why
Yeah,
you've
yeah,
ended up where
gotcha.
you are.
Gotcha. So yes, I'm at the the rather fabulous Royal College of Anaesthetists at the moment, and I do interim sort of senior tech and board posts and a bit of consultancy. But at the moment, I'm the interim tech and digital services director for the RCOA, as it's shortened to. Prior to that, I've been a CIO, a transformation director, a solutions architect, all sorts of those kind of named things, working at places like Marie Curie, British Red Cross, Institution of Civil Engineers, British Medical Association. So yeah, it's very much third sector and membership and charities. And I'd say I haven't had a particularly linear career. So actually, I actually only moved into what you call a proper IT department quite late on. And prior to that, I started out in what nowadays would be called customer service. Back then, it was donor care, supporter care, and I moved around doing events, fundraising, marketing, analytics, and so on. So yeah, so it's quite late when I went into traditional tech, and I guess that's actually been really quite useful. So I've been like a kind of a customer that's moaned about the service desk, and I've been a supplier moaning about the customer service desk. So you see both sides. And why do I do what I do? Well, it's a bit of a cliche, but I like my efforts to send resources and money downwards rather than upwards to a shareholder. And day to day, why I do it is, I guess, I like to see things improve. It's pretty basic. I'm not actually, despite my job and career, I'm not a fetishist on tech. I don't get particularly excited about the latest mobile app or a server with flashing lights and all of that. The thing that I'm interested in is actually seeing some tangible change. So we implemented X and we can deliver medical services faster by Y. That's why I do it.
Yeah, no, look, you make it sound as noble a cause as it is. Now, delivering and achieving change, I think, the topic of today's conversation is the evolution versus transformation debate, and the hot topic for the past few years has been digital transformation, especially in the membership and not-for-profit sector. Which, in my experience, is a sector that brings along more challenges than we might see, let's say, in the private sector.
Yeah.
Before we kind of dig into it, I suppose one good question is, how do you see digital transformation? I mean, if you had to just explain it in a sentence or two, how would you explain digital transformation?
Yeah. So hands up, I'm a bit of a misery guts when it comes to digital transformation. The term, particularly the term transformation. I know it's not necessarily great for an agency doing that, but I'll explain. I'll try and dig into it. So I think something that's genuinely transformative actually doesn't just make you do what you already do a bit faster, a bit better, more engaging, etc. I think something to be really, really transformative, it has to have such a high scale impact, and generally it's doing something different. So I'll give you an example. Oh, and sorry, and I should add, it's not necessarily the tech that does the transforming. I would say it's people's. Of course, you need the tech to drive it, but often it's people's attitude. And I'll give you an example. So way back when e-commerce was becoming a thing, and you started getting like an explosion of websites selling you stuff that you would traditionally go down the high street to buy, but so the tech was amazing. You know, it was a breakthrough, HTTP, etc. It was a real breakthrough with the web, and the ability to, you know, pay for something and get it delivered through the web just seems like normal now. But back in the day, that was really quite something. But what people would do is they'd have a look online at what was for sale, and they didn't trust buying things through the web because of money, fraud, etc. So they'd have a look online, and then they'd go down and they'd go and buy it from the shop. Nowadays, people might well go in a shop and try a pair of shoes on and then go buy it online. So the bit that's actually transformed there is people trusting putting their credit card details into a computer. So it's that, and when you unpack the transformation bit, I mean, have a look at the high street, have a look, you know, shops closing, Amazon vast. That's the transformation, and it's about trust and market share rather than necessarily one bit of tech. So I know that's quite a big, broad answer, but for membership and charities and the like, I think an awful lot of it, particularly for membership, is about engagement. So transforming what you do digitally, of course, it's going to have process efficiencies, and allow you to do things in a sort of much more rapid and interesting way. But I think the real value is in how you can up that, you know, the whole single customer view, CRM. It's really taking it a step beyond that and saying, how can we use our data to kind of super engage and personalize and take members on a particular journey? I think that's the transformative bit for the members. There's two flavors: inside productivity, outside engagement.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, with membership organizations, and this became particularly prominent during COVID. I think that was like a catalyst for the whole sector to realize that digital transformation isn't should we do it? It's when are we going to do it, and how quickly can we do it?
Yeah.
Rather.
Yeah, and I'll
Now,
tell you.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, yeah, I was going to give you a COVID example, again, in keeping with my slightly miserable outlook on this. I think the biggest digital transformation in the last, 5-6 years was actually organizations being able to switch in lockdown to work from home, just like that, you know? If COVID had hit 15, 20 years ago, it could have wrecked the world's economy, or people just wouldn't have locked down. They would have just carried on. So digital transformations don't necessarily always come from an agency doing a mood board with post-its type, all that good stuff, you know, the positive, the drive. That particular transformation, I would argue, was your traditional old IT bloke making the case to say, should we put in Teams, should we put in O365? You know, the transformation there was the world could keep working.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say need is the mother of innovation, I believe, is the phrase.
There you go.
So it's something, and I think, you know, in our industry, certainly, and I come from an IT background, there's you look historically as to where does this whole 9 to 5 being in the office even come from, you know, and you can go as far back as the Industrial Revolution, when people needed to be at factories, and then you know, later on you needed to be in the office to access the local domain server to actually get on the network to be able to do your job. And then these, you know, technologies evolved exponentially since that time, where remote working has been possible for quite a long time now, but only once an external need arises, like the lockdown, do we actually realize what tools we've got at our disposal and how we can adapt. And I find this a little bit of a challenge when talking about digital transformation in itself, is that a lot of organizations, and particularly membership organizations, they have a way of doing things because these are organizations that have been around before technology. So they've developed a set of processes and ways in which they do what they do with a view of offering value
Mm,
to their members and engaging with their members more. And digital transformation has come along as, it's something that I think that there's still a lack of true understanding of, a lack of buy-in from the right driving forces within these organizations. And what I'm seeing on an increasing basis is organizations looking to digitalize the way in which they do things.
yeah,
So
yeah,
continue doing everything how we do it now, just make it digital and then calling it a digital
yeah,
transformation, where
yeah.
that's obviously not what they're supposed to be doing. Um, how have
No,
you
that's
seen
that.
the
No,
same?
that's the heart of it. That's the heart. I think you've hit the nub of the issue there, which is in a cutthroat corporate world. If someone comes along and says, if you got rid of that department, streamline this, flew that, did that, do that, and stuck some digital on it, your profit would go up by this much. In the nice membership and charity world, people approach it with this idea that there's like a bag of magic dust called digital transformation that you sprinkle on your org exactly as it already works, and hey presto, you're making more money, and so you're right, that is the core of the issue.
Yeah. Well, and I find that this obviously it does two things. One, it wastes a lot of money in one project after another, attempting to address this black hole of digital transformation, and two, the mindset itself, I believe, is a root cause for why these projects are not successful. So, in your experience, how would you go about addressing this mindset? I mean, what would be your recommendation on the key steps that need to be taken to overcome these hurdles that we have
mm,
before
mm,
we even begun?
mm. So I in a nutshell, look at the tech last, which it sounds a bit counterproductive, but I think a lot of people say the answer is digital, and it's actually, I think it's really healthy, Ned. You're asking this question because a lot of the big firms, the sort of the big four in this world, they will play the game of going, the answer is digital transformation, and then we'll worry about what the question was later. And
Yeah.
so I think the key to doing it well is starting by saying, well, before we get excited about the tech, what is it that we actually want to do differently and why? So what stakeholders have we got? Is our focus better engagement? Do we want to listen to them more and let them influence what we do? So figure out that kind of the reason why you're wanting to do things. Don't just put a line at the end that says, and this aligns with section B on our strategy. Really stress it and say, well, is it going to support the strategy? And then have a look at how capable your organization is to make that change. So a bit like taking your car for an MOT, before you go out racing it on a racetrack, make sure the tires are inflated, make sure the seat belts work. Because I think there's back to this idea of you apply digital transformation on top of something that already exists in one form and it will suddenly make it better. Actually, I think there's some really quite sort of serious bits that you need to have a look at organizationally and say, is our structure right? Are our people right? That thing that we've been ignoring for years because it's so far not been a problem of being able to keep a lid on it, is that all going to fall apart when we apply this new tech to it? So you have to go through these really quite challenging things to work out how much you're willing to change and then stick some tech on it to get some value.
Yeah, you see, you said a very interesting phrase there, and you started with something along the lines of, what is it that we would like to do differently?
Mm,
And I think that in itself becomes a challenge. I think the realization that digital transformation is about transforming the organization and changing the way in which the organization functions is the key, and not about technologically reinforcing your existing organization. And I think there's a lot of and there's a lot of these digital transformation initiatives out there without that recognition having happened, that's there, and the digital transformation more as business as usual, a little bit like, you know, you're changing the boiler in your house, something that needs to happen from time to time, but you expect it to work in exactly the same in the same way. These are certainly, I would say, the biggest mindset challenges that I've come across from my perspective, working as a service provider to the sector. You've worked on the other side, where you are championing a cause internally, and what I've seen from, you know, externally looking at an individual in like yourself's perspective, is that often you will have to create a case and almost lobby the senior powers within your organizations, the digital transformation to be undertaken. How much of a challenge is it that just the fact that you've got to do this, and then how do you go about overcoming that challenge?
Interesting. Right. So how big a challenge is it? Massive. I would say probably the biggest blocker is that top table getting it and supporting it. And you know, you get these kind of wash up post-project, post-program review type things of digital transformations in organizations where they ask the question, why didn't it work? And often it really irks me. Often people will say things like, the staff weren't digitally literate enough. And so the people running the transformation blame the people for not being, you know, ready. But actually, if you follow the breadcrumb trail, it really goes to the top there, and you get, you know, senior groups will put a lot of money and resource into something without really understanding what it means, and need to prepare people and change. And it's not the juniors' fault. It's the top fault. And I think it's also the hardest to address. So it really depends on, you know, I've gone to some organizations and been really lucky because they say we really want to do this, and they're up for it. So I'll give you one example. I went somewhere and they said, we feel that a data warehouse is absolutely crucial to our mission. And I said, well, why do you want one? And to their credit, they stopped and they went, do you know, we're not really sure. We've heard that that's the thing that we need. So they were great. So I could work with them and saying, well, come on, you know, let's unpick it and see what's actually going to drive the value. So that was lovely. But then on the other hand, you can get to somewhere where, you know, people assume these big senior teams, everything's in control, it's all running, you know, normally, but there can be real variations of interest, buy-in, ability, etc. And just because one of them or the chief exec is saying we're going to transform everything, and just because people are nodding around the table doesn't mean it's going to fly. And it is a really hard one to crack. And sometimes you just have to look at it and say, in a very grown-up way, this is not possible to do unless you change X, Y, and Z. So I suggest you pause until, and so I've done that. Not, again, it's a bit counterproductive. It's not like on a tech front, but it's really saying to seniors, this won't work unless you know, recognize some of the, again, this is going to be really old school, but Prince 2, you know, the bit that people tend to flick past in the manual to that is one of the first principles is continued business justification. And they actually suggest every board you have, you should start by saying, should we bother still doing this? And people don't do that, and things just kind of run.
Yeah, I like that example, and I think again you started with, when we take a look back and see why hasn't this worked. What particularly irritates me, I would say, is the amount of cases where you don't actually see the recognition that it hasn't worked. So this insistence on viewing it as a project that we're going to do in a year or two in a defined amount of time. The people that judge the success of it are the people usually responsible for the delivery of the project. And how do you even judge the success of that, of a digital transformation, because it should be something that never ends, theoretically. So how would you actually measure the impact, and how would you say that that's a successful digital transformation versus an unsuccessful one?
So a really good point, this, and I think it starts with a cardinal rule that what people break is they list the fact that something's gone live as the success criteria. So we have gone live with the new website. This is a successful digital transformation. I mean, I've even seen, I'm upgrading my server from Apache 11.1 to 11.2. It's a digital transformation. No, it's not. It's like a housekeeping thing. So people's concept of what progress and success is very much focused on the tech moving from state A to state B, where I think you have to approach this with a there's kind of a quantitative hard measures. So I did something at a previous organization where we said the time it currently takes to add a member's record to the system and process whatever is 25 minutes, and post the work we were doing, it was 5 minutes. So there you go, that's freed up 5 times however many start, etc., etc. So you can get some really nice numbers out of these things. But then the next is to say, well, with that freed up time, these people did something else which was of value. So it's getting into and what are we doing differently, not just what have we saved or what we changed. And then on the qualitative, I mean, really it comes down to asking your members what they think. Do you feel more engaged? Do you feel that the events that we talk to you are more relevant to you? Do you feel that the things that we think you're interested in and suggest are what you want? And you made the point. You said, continual rather than like a one-off. Is it incremental and evolutionary? It's not a case of getting to the end of a digital transformation and going, well, that was good. It's actually trying to check with members and say, are we getting better? Are we listening to you? Are we, that's a digital ongoing effort as opposed to a one-off piece of work.
Yeah, one way in which I describe success as is everything you've just said, with the recognition that actually how you're engaging with your members and the services that you're offering is something that's going to continually change. And people responsible for engagement with the audience will continually have ideas and feedback driven decisions about how they can improve customer journeys and interactions with their members. Their ability to implement those ideas in as much of an autonomous manner as possible, to me, is a telltale sign of success or lack of success, because I think that it's about creating that culture of continually experimenting and being curious at all levels of the organization. So if you see an opportunity to skip a step in a daily task that you have to do, then skip that step and see what happens. So it's about that ability to actually implement it.
An example I give for this is like a shop window. If you've got a seasonal shop window, so I'm putting things in for Halloween, for Easter, for this, that, it's got a really short shelf life. So if you're going to try and personalize and appeal to people, you have to be really fleet of foot and agile to keep that going, or it can get very stale and people can feel that they're not listened to. And sometimes maybe you're better off with something a bit generic if you can't react and retune rapidly based on what your audience want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find, and both of us have been around long enough to have seen firsthand the cyclical nature of technology and technology trends. And as far as where we are technologically in terms of CRM, CMS, LMS technologies, we're very much a microservices API first chapter, let's say, which is a huge U-turn from where the industry was about 10 years ago. And I think in the membership sector, we're still seeing two very polarized approaches on how to address
Mm,
digital transformation, you've still
mm,
got a sector that's massively saturated with, without naming anybody, some of these
mm.
one-stop shop, all-in-one, all singing, all
Yeah,
dancing membership platforms. And then you've got other organizations that will preach what I refer to as a best of breed approach, and
yeah, yeah,
actually
yeah,
buy a CMS for your content management and nothing more. Buy the whatever it is that you need for the purpose that you need it. What's
yeah.
your view as somebody who's been in the industry, and seen both approaches? What's your view on, is there a right approach?
Yeah, gotcha, gotcha. I'll tell you what. So no, it's a no, it's a really, really interesting point. This, and it goes back to that question of how much should tech drive the question. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I've seen places going, we're at a real crossroads with our digital strategy and transformation. We're not sure whether to go with headless CMS or monolithic, and you're like, well, what difference will it make to how you work? And they haven't got to that point. They're just obsessed about or as you say, best of breed and microservices and interactions and da 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 da. Well, is that going to make you more money, or is it going to make people like you more? It's really, these are kind of hygiene questions that not to disparage any of the real techies, but that's the sort of thing on a digital transformation level. If I was leading one, I'd be happy to say, you're the expert, these are the outcomes I want, go and figure out what the best thing is. Having said that, I'll give you my sort of tech view on it. I think, like you said, it kind of goes in waves. So whatever you decide now, it will be something else in 2 or 3 years. So I think the key is being adaptable and not sort of wedding yourself too far down a certain route. So, for example, you'll have firms that will say, look, we've got this amazing CRM which has a portal front end that can act as your website, and it's also got a finance bit that can do da 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 da. And I would be really careful of those things, because there's just too much in one basket, which means you can't move as things change. But then the other direction is you'll get people that will sell you these amazing best of breed, I've got Zendesk here and I've got this e-commerce thing here. And actually what you don't realize is you're building this whopping great third application, which is the integration to control the environment. And you're wedding yourself to one vendor who's the only one who knows how that environment works. So going either extreme can be really quite dangerous. So it's a bit of a cop out, but I'd say it's like the Goldilocks thing. Go for the middle bit and have a mix.
so to sum it up, one size does not fit all, and there's
Indeed.
different solutions for different scenarios.
Yeah.
Which is something I absolutely agree with. But you touched upon the dependence, depending on a particular vendor. So you don't want to go too
Mm,
niche on something where
mm,
you should always aim to be independent. Well, that's interesting, because the technologies that, what you'll often find within the membership industry is that the technologies have been created by a service provider. So there's
yeah.
technology tools that have been built by a service provider, and this tool becomes a means of selling additional services. So I think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
the kind of warning that I would give is that look who you're doing business with. If you're buying software, buy it from a
Mm,
software provider. If you're buying services, buy it from a service provider. Where you see an overlap
yeah.
between the two, that creates an inherent conflict of interest, and a
Yeah.
dependence.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've just reminded me, actually, I would say whenever you're buying tech, you're actually buying two things. You're buying a bit of kit and you're buying a partner that's going to work with you. And
Yeah.
people tend to focus very much on the first, but not necessarily enough on the latter. Whereas I'd say it's 50-50. I'd say you need to kind of future cast a bit and think. My good acid test is if I was looking for a flat share, could I handle living in a flat with supply X for a year and them not nicking my milk in the fridge, etc. That's the test for them. And I think, just back to the tech for a question, I think a good rule of thumb is, if if things are kind of within a similar framework or language, or they're kind of interchangeable without the need to, if you look at two things and you think that would be great, but I'll have to build something on top to get them to talk to each other, that's not necessarily a good sign. So it's, if discounting that, and somewhere between the oh, here's one thing that does everything, not that either. So somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a good example that I still refer to is the vast majority of users that use Microsoft Word, which is the majority of the world, will never use something like 98% of the capabilities of the software.
Yeah.
And I think most people don't realize that. So you're absolutely right. When you buy a solution, don't let the technology drive your strategy. Define your strategy and worry about technology later. It is the right partner that will help you find the right solution for whatever task at hand you've got. So while we're on technology, we're talking about all these exponentially changing dynamics that we have to deal with. AI is something that's becoming, again, another hot topic, and I think people are still trying to figure out if, how, what, and how it applies to them. Have you had any dealings with AI technologies, or any particular areas in the world of AI that you think are going to be impactful as far as digital transformation is concerned?
Yeah. So I think this kind of roughly splits into two camps. I think there's the kind of the personal productivity stuff, so generating minutes, generative AI for templates and so on. I think there's an awful lot that individuals within organizations can do in a relatively kind of isolated and unprocess changing way. It's actually, there's an awful lot that they can crack on with. And that doesn't need leadership from the top or a big plan or whatever. I mean, with a lot of these things, it's like someone somewhere will go, and we must have a strategy for X, and before you know it, half the staff are doing it, and they're doing it quite well. So let's not stifle the innovation of the individuals on that. I think the harder bit is, I guess, what I'd call like data-driven AI stuff. So this is where, to get value out of it, you have to really have your house in order in terms of a little bit back to the tech, good data in a structured way with APIs that the AI can get to and then push out onto a platform to display it, etc. I think for that kind of AI activity, it needs really good sort of data and tech and cleanliness around that. But you're also, I think, giving away a bit of your organization's voice and intellectual property. So this is where you have to be really careful. So I'll give you an example. So where I am at the moment, the anaesthetist, they have a really good, they have the guide to doing best practice anesthesia in the UK, thing called the Gold Guide. Now you could point AI at that and create a large language model that did all sorts of whizzy things and could answer questions for people off that, which would be far quicker than emailing and asking a human. But what you're doing, the question you're facing there is, if something goes wrong, or if something is interpreted differently, who's at fault there? Is it the algorithm, or is it the trustees of the Royal College? So there are some real pitfalls, which in this example, that could mean someone's life. So there are these really big questions, which I think people haven't quite, like the ethics, if you like, the ethics and the ownership of the results of AI, which frankly scare me. So I'm kind of playing it safe and more in the kind of individual productivity bit at the moment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And look, like anything in its infancy, it's something that's still not very legislated, and the capabilities are still being defined, and the possibilities. So I was in Lisbon last week at the Web Summit. This was the hot topic of the week, and it's a question on how do you go about creating legislation and security around AI? It's still a very, very hot topic, and I think that it's not something we're going to necessarily see flourish within the membership sector in the next year or two, but I do
Yeah.
think there are some advantages that are byproducts of what they were intended to be. So one of the areas where we've managed to make a significant impact within one of our migration projects has been with the use of AI. And so, for example, the capability of these AI co-pilots to ingest data. So the way in which they are designed is you point at any data source and it'll go and ingest that data and then build its own large language model, and you then have different agents on what they do with that data. But you know, that was created as a necessary feature in order for the AI technology to work. What the byproduct of that has meant on a very complex project with a lot of technological debt is that we've managed to evade migration of about 500,000 pieces of content, because historically
How
we would have needed
interesting.
to
Yeah.
migrate the content so it could get searchable, indexed, and so on. But if we just ingest it, because we never need that content here. So there are some ways appearing
So that
in our
I'd say is far more transformative, as in it was an unknown consequence of what you were doing, which actually opened something up. So that does sound transformative to me. I tell you, you know, something else I'm seeing or concerned. Actually, no, I'll give you one negative, one positive. So the concern is I'm starting to see the humans altering their delivery style because of what's coming through on AI. So, for example, you can get some really pro sounding, you know, if you type into AI, what should my network strategy be or something, or is this a good route rather than that, into ChatGPT, it'll give you a really pro sounding language, which sounds like a consultancy's created it. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But what I'm seeing is people are starting to kind of ape that and do their own version of it, and you're losing a slight kind of, yeah, but you know, I'm a human, and so I think that's interesting. I'll give you my positive just to try and level it out. Where, you know, that question of where is membership, what's the differences with commercial? One area I think actually there is some similarity and value in around AI is your basic question answers. So if I've got car insurance or whatever, and I want to say, am I covered for X? There's no ambiguity or subjectivity. It's either I am or I'm not, and that's the kind of stuff that like a chatbot can be great at. And if you look at membership organizations, there's an awful lot of those questions that could be around your subscription, your mailing preferences, your whatever the thing that you're a member of. So my outfit, you know, they do a big part of what they are is training and examinations. So there's loads of questions around what is the next exam after that one, which bit of the syllabus I should be looking at. So there could be some really interesting stuff to do with chatbots around that. But I think the key is that it's not subjective. It's very binary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually think that that's where the reason why we're investing into exploring and experimenting with these technologies is from the user experience piece. I do think that once implemented correctly in the right context, it will be a game changer. And with a lot of membership organizations, you know, the audience might not necessarily be tech savvy individuals or even people who have readily available access to a PC. And then integration of things like voice capability, where ultimately it's all about that customer experience. So I think we're coming to an age where we'll see an increased amount of organizations enable verbal communication with the website.
Yeah. And do you know what? You're just making me think on that. But back to that question of what are the success measures? And this is quite a traditional customer service one, which I think is entirely applicable to AI and the chatbot stuff we're talking about, is how many people did I need to be transferred to in order to get an answer to the thing I wanted? And also, how many times did I have to repeat my details and what I want to those people? And you know, if you look at and if someone says, well, I got transferred 3 times and I had to tell them my name and, you know, again and again, actually I went online, or I went on a voice and I might not have known it, and I said it once and it figured it out and it told me like that. That's transformative.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron, I could talk with you all day about these things. Clearly, we're very like-minded in this, but we are running out of the desired time slot that we were aiming for. And I would have to ask you just one common question that I ask all my guests. But if you were giving some advice to the next big membership organization that's about to undertake a digital transformation, what are the top 3 bits of advice that you would give them to set them up for success?
Top 3, let me see. So I think probably the first one goes back to what we were talking about before, about or I was saying, look at the tech last and look at your ability to change and why you want to change first. I think that's the first thing. Don't get swept up in the false progress, or the sense of, you know, if you're not doing it. I think the next would be listen to the junior people. So again, a bit naff this, but I find a lot of decisions to proceed are made quite rightly by senior teams, but they can do it in a kind of a small bubble where they all furiously agree with each other. And sometimes, in fact, a lot of the time, I find it's really important to talk to someone at the other end, and you might find that their big problem is they have to click their mouse 3 times in a row when they want to click it once, and it annoys them and it makes them angry and, you know, not very nice on the phone or whatever. So getting each of these voices and building a really balanced picture up and down and across before you move, I think is really, really important. And a third one, get everyone on the CRM. There you go. Nice and classic, old school. But you know, every organization everywhere has tried and continues with some sort of big philosophically driven CRM program to rule the world, and they always have people that go, yeah, no thanks, I'll just keep doing this on my spreadsheet or in my MailChimp or whatever. But if you back to the AI and the data and automation and so on, it's just not going to happen unless you don't have, whether it's a CRM or a customer data platform, you know, it's all got to live in there, and people need to really understand why that's important, and it goes beyond their kind of siloed process. There you go.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how good a tech stack you've got, if nobody's using it, it's useless.
Absolutely.
Right? So user adoption is key. Okay, well, look, Aaron, thank you so much for joining me today. I found the chat very insightful, and I think we need to have a few more on different topics with how many tangents we could go in. But thank you so much.
I'll try to be less busy next time.
Right. So thank you again, Aaron, and I look forward to our next conversation, whatever that may be.
Cheers, Ned, and thanks for listening, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you all.